Hello and welcome, everyone. Today's guest I want to introduce you to is a good friend, Carl Reeder. He's a serial entrepreneur. He's a chairman of business advisory firm D&T in the UK. He's also the author of a number of books. I'm sure you've read some of them: Boss It, The Startup Coach, and The Franchising Handbook. He features regularly in the national press and on stage, which is actually where we met. We'll probably talk about that today. And he's helped thousands of business owners either start, grow, or probably even exit their business. Welcome to the show, Carl. It's been almost a year since we met first face to face at Intuit QuickBooks in San Jose.
I know, it's crazy, right? So, Rondalyn, thank you so much for having me on your show. And I've got to
My
say, that,
pleasure.
that intro was perfect. It was almost as if I'd written it myself, wasn't it?
Yeah, next time I'll get you to write one. We'll see what happens. That's a bit of tongue in cheek. Well, look, I think probably one of the first things that I noticed when I met you is you're not the typical person I think that someone would expect to see if they thought they were going to be meeting with their accountant for the first time. I mean, not that many people start out at 16 with YTS as a hairdresser and then end up somehow being the head of an award-winning multi-tier accountancy firm in the UK. I mean, how did that happen?
So, I have to be brutally honest, Rondalyn, it all happened by accident. So, to share a little bit of my story, I actually left school before my GCSEs. So, GCSEs in the UK are the exams that you take at the age of 16, and they are the very basic high school qualification. And something within me told me that it was a great idea to leave school. I had a fantastic grammar school that I was part of, but to leave school and start a YTS apprenticeship in hairdressing. Now, that lasted all of about 6 weeks. And if you pardon the pun, I just simply wasn't cut out for it. So I went back to school, completed my exams, having missed about 4 months of education. And then I had to decide what I was going to do with myself. So I did as every teenager does. I got the newspaper back then, looked at the jobs, and applied for 2 jobs in accountancy, one in the army. But I had no idea what an accountant did. In fact, I remember quite vividly going to the local library and looking through the career papers, and trying to learn what an accountant did, what accountancy was, what a set of accounts was, what a tax return was, and then just regurgitating it in my interview. But I worked out pretty quickly, got the job, but I didn't enjoy it. I didn't actually like being an accountant, but what I loved was going out, meeting business owners, speaking to them. So I guess, Rondalyn, how it happened, I just carved out my own role. It started through training businesses. So this was in the late 90s, trying to get them to computerize. I then got given a batch of clients when I moved to D&T in Swindon. I then became the salesperson, then the marketing person. I then started off the management buyout. So we did a management buyout of the firm and then scaled it and went on the mission of taking it from a team of 8 up to a multi-million turnover firm. We've got about 3,000 clients now. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun on that journey as well.
Yeah, well, look, I think what's amazing about all of this is you've probably seen a lot, right, in the journey. You've been at it for a few years. How do you think that, somebody like you, right, that came from didn't have it wasn't your life aspiration, obviously, to be an accountant. If you didn't even really know what the job entailed, you had to do some research. I'm guessing that you had quite a lot of life experience that you brought into it. Plus, you've got a few tattoos, right? When someone sees you for the first time, they're probably thinking that you're more likely to be a professional artist or somebody that's really, thinking using the different parts of their brain and not so much of the intellectual, the cerebral, the numerical stuff. How do you think those extra perspectives and skills that you naturally bought just because of who you are has actually helped to shape the type of accountant that you've become?
Sure. So I think you've hit on a really valid point here, and it's not one that I've discussed too often, but I think that it's been immensely valuable, even if it is so far as being able to ask the awkward questions that everybody else feels like they should know. So if we first of all start with coming in from a non-traditional route, so most people tend to fall into accountancy having chosen at some point in their journey to become an accountant. Now, that point might be at school, it might be at university, it might be by virtue of the qualifications that they've taken, it might even be that they've run a business and then enjoyed the finances side of it. But often there's an element of choice along the way and consideration about the kind of person they are. Now, Rondine, I have to be really honest and share a little bit more of my story to, I guess, explain just how accidental it was. Why did I get a full-time job? Why did I become an accountant? Because my first child was on the way. So again, it was a crazy situation to be in at the age of 16. But that was the reality, and I had to find a job that was going to pay the bills. And ultimately, accountancy was one of the interviews that I was offered. But in truth, had I gone to a law firm or an architect's or even the other interview I had at the army, whatever job I would have fallen into, I would have probably just stuck at for the sake of paying my bills rather than any aspiration to do okay in that career. This just could just have easily have been a job in retail or hospitality or so on. It was just a job that was going to pay a wage at the end of the week. So there was a level of, I guess, luck and a level of coincidence that my personality type and the way that I am, the way that I do things, was actually the polar opposite of what was needed within an accounting firm. Because actually, I think that's really helped me. Most of us in the accounting world tend to come in, as you say, very much detail focused, analytical people. We're great at solving problems. We're great at getting our head around quite complex situations. But is that necessarily what business owners need? Yes, it is to some point, but actually there's another side to it as well when it comes to clarifying and communicating in plain English. But sometimes the accountant mindset doesn't necessarily help us with. So yeah, I think that it's a great question that you've raised. And you mentioned the tattoos. My first one was actually at the age of 16, but don't tell anybody, although I'm telling you all on this podcast. I guess creativity's always been within me, and that was what originally drove me towards hairdressing, and I guess it's what's driven me towards the things like writing my books and speaking and all of the stuff that I do that certainly isn't sitting down adding up a row of numbers.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, how do you think that you have introduced a lot of creativity into what you do with your clients, and how do you think that that's evolved over time? Because I'm guessing that you've gotten better and better at it. It probably started off feeling a bit awkward, but you've needed to evolve over time. And how do you think that's played out?
Yeah, look, I think that you're absolutely right that it evolves over time, because one of the key challenges we have as people, and please do stop me if we go too far off tangent here, but it's something that fascinates me, is the psychology of people and why they do what they do. Often we have a work persona and a personal persona. So we have who we are as an individual and who we have to be at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning when we're suited and booted, and we put on our power mode and we're talking to clients and colleagues and so on. And don't get me wrong, when I first started out in accountancy, I was advising business owners by the age of 18. And thankfully, I'd already started losing my hair because I needed every tool in my toolkit to persuade these business owners that they should listen to me. So what did I do? I got a 3-piece suit from Gives and Hawkes, which was a very expensive London tailor. I bought a BMW on hire purchase. All this stuff that I couldn't afford. But I did it with the intention of clients seeing me as a credible business advisor who was perhaps in their 30s, rather than as a young kid telling them how to run their business. So we always have this disconnect between who we are personally and who we are in business. But do you know what? Over time, I've realized that actually that disconnect is unhealthy and it doesn't actually serve any of us. So I've managed to step away from that disconnect and just bring myself to the fore. And it's been a gradual process, as you kind of alluded to. It's not been something that was certainly an overnight decision or anything like that. But what I found is that congruence between my personal self and my business self not only made my role far more satisfying, but it allowed me to truly bring, I guess, my own innovation and passion and creativity into the core business. And how has that benefited clients? I think it's benefited clients massively. I think that rather than looking at individual client cases, because I'm not on the tool, so I don't really do the client facing work, what it's allowed us to do is to instill a culture within the business that allows people to be themselves. And in turn, that allows the people within the business to build deeper relationships with our clients. So it's allowed us to become, I guess, the main people within the industries that we serve. You know, we've become the go-to characters that people go to for just advice and support on anything in relation to their business. And it just so happens that we do the numbers too.
Do you find, like, I mean, obviously this is kind of a huge question coming, but we've had a remarkable year, an astounding year, a year that I don't think anybody could have predicted what we've all globally been through with this pandemic. Do you think that it's kind of in some ways been a little bit of the perfect storm in terms of really bringing the whole cash flow and cash issues to the forefront with a lot of the clients that your firm is dealing with? So now more than ever, they can't run from this issue anymore. It's a ugly issue. It's a scary issue. It's a confusing issue, but they can't outrun it anymore and they have to face it now.
Sure. So I think yes, but I'd like to elaborate on that answer because a one-word answer never goes down too well on a podcast. I think that you're absolutely right. It's brought awareness to business owners in general that actually cash is king, and I think that there's been a huge wake-up call both within businesses, but also hopefully at a governmental level, that businesses aren't necessarily sat on big cash reserves. I think that we've all seen business failures, unfortunately. We've all walked down a local high street and seen closed doors. We've all seen real levels of pain. And I've been involved in a lot of lobbying with the UK government who haven't really supported businesses. They've supported the employees, but not the businesses. So I think, yes, there's been a raise in awareness of the benefits that an accountant can bring to a business in helping them through a cash flow crisis, and the awareness of a business owner that it's important to manage cash going forwards rather than to run your business on your bank statement or even worse, what happened historically 12 months ago.
I like to always focus my clients when I'm working with them on the tangible stuff, right? Cash flow is a certainty. Your cash forecast is not. Right? Cash flow always tells you where the cash is trapped in the business. And it's the same for personal budgeting and finance as well. If we focus on the basics, like where is the cash currently trapped and how do we unlock it, and focus a little bit less on fancy forecasting techniques that may or may not come to fruition, we probably assist our clients a lot more, right?
Hey, and listen, I'm possibly going to upset most accountant listeners now, but there's a number who subscribe to various tools and so on to become cash flow experts, but then only realise a year down the line the amount of unused subscriptions they've got in tools to try and help manage cash flow for their clients.
Well, and at the end of the day, it isn't about predicting cash flow. It's about holding your client's hand and assisting them to fix it, right? It's about putting strategies in place so that it doesn't keep getting trapped month after month. And it's also, as I like to say, talking to people about their stinking thinking, right? If you've got chronic poverty mindset, you need to change the way that you talk and think about money before a forecast is ever going to help you, because you will just keep sabotaging yourself over and over again.
Agree 100%. So back when I was doing client work, the books that I'd recommend to clients were The Richest Man in Babylon, And the other book was Rich Dad Poor Dad. Now, Rich Dad Poor Dad was specifically for the cash flow quadrant and to help them understand, um, you know, a different view of assets and liabilities than that which is normally taught by accountants. You know, it certainly wouldn't work if we were to submit a set of accounts with that definition, but it helps them understand a different way of thinking and to open their perception. And look, one of the things that we need to be really aware of as advisors to businesses is that our clients are nowhere near as intelligent as we give them credit for. Generally, most people aren't, accountants included, and often they have not had any form of financial education whatsoever, not through school, not through a formal training course. So we're at risk sometimes of presuming a base level of knowledge that the clients might not have. And in fact, that was one of the reasons why I wrote my book, Boss It, was so that business owners have basically got um, a full dummies guide for business, you know, how to do the basics in their business, to then give a platform so that the advice that my team give is not having to cover the basics, but also we can make sure that nothing's missed out. Look, how many business owners truly know the difference between margin and markup? How many business owners truly know the difference between gross profit and net profit? All of this stuff that we as accountants might take for granted, they've never been taught it. And if they don't understand the critical KPIs that they need to be looking at in their business, if they don't understand how to decide what the KPIs are that they should be monitoring, then actually a lot of our work is going to be in vain.
Well, and they're going to be frustrated as well, because one of the things that I learned, so I stepped away, I guess, a little bit from the industry. I qualified in law and accounting first, and then I went out and studied clinical hypnotherapy and read a lot of books on neuroscience. And one of the things I discovered is that people don't want to admit that they don't know things as well. There's a lot of shame in it. And so people will often, you're in a meeting with them and they'll nod their head and they'll say, yes, 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 because they don't want to admit that they don't understand. And we need to get better as, people that work in the financial industry of making sure that we're talking to people in terms that are easy to grasp and that they can actually take it and run with it and do it.
And there's a real challenge. And this is one of the reasons why to bring back at the start, I can test the difference between work and personal personas. And I think it's really important to have that human element and authenticity in everything that you do. You know, when you show up at 9 o'clock on Monday or 3 p.m. on a Saturday afternoon, if you're going to a sports match or whatever, it's vital that you are congruent and you are the same person in both environments. It's why I stand up against the use of the term professionals and practice and all of this stuff, because the problem is when businesses deal with accountants, there's a hierarchical professional client relationship. And that professional client relationship brings with it two stigmas that are very difficult to break. The first one is that the professional can sometimes feel compelled to use big words and complicated jargon to show how important they are. And the business owner is afraid to let the advisor know that they haven't got a clue what the advisor's saying. So with those two risks, you then have a very real communication gap between the two people. And it means that the advisor can't truly deliver on the advice that they're supposed to be giving. So look, I'm a big believer things need to be simplified. They need to be in plain English. And I think that if ever we as a group, as an industry, or if we use the term profession, if we can take one thing away, I think it should be that we should look to translate everything into language that an 8-year-old can understand as much as possible. If we can make it, if we can make it really simple, then we've done our job. Because look, a client is never going to leave you or is never going to have a bad outcome because the advice was too easy to understand.
Exactly. They're only going to have a bad outcome if they go away and do nothing because they're confused or terrified. And what if you had to give a little bit of advice to just a consumer, like a client of an accounting firm, if they're really struggling right now to understand where they're at personally with their finances or with their business, what would you
What would I advise to a business owner? Get your head out of the sand. Generally speaking, most business owners, to some extent, have their head in the sand, and they deliberately blank out the stuff that they don't want to face, the stuff that they don't really understand, the stuff that they're scared of. And you can get into a really powerful place in your business, whatever your trade. And this applies to the accountants as well. You get into a really powerful place when you can face up and own your own weaknesses, because then it's down to you to find a solution, and whether that's to improve your own education, whether that's to outsource, whether that's to take advice, whatever the answer is, acknowledging that you have these weaknesses and you have these blind spots is the first thing that you need to do.
Yeah, and the other thing I want to leave everybody with as well is you have written a number of really great books, but I'm hearing a lot about Boss It just because it's the most recent of the three. What do you want to tell everybody about it, and where can they find it?
Yeah, sure. So Boss It was the book that I wanted to write first time round, in honesty. However, I was under contract with a major publisher, but it was what was known as a series book, not a freeform book. So Boss It is, I guess, a culmination of my life's learnings, both of running and scaling a business myself, but the accumulated knowledge of thousands of businesses. So I really see it, Rondalyn, as I guess the more up-to-date version of the E-Myth Revisited that advisors can give their clients and that businesses can use to give them some very simple models. So within it, I share my model for running a successful business and scaling a successful business. But it also works really well for accountants. And what I'm finding, there's quite a few accountants now who bought bulk copies. They've bought a box of them to give to their clients to provoke conversation, so that their clients can read through it. It's a tangible gift that helps with their client satisfaction. But also the business owners can read through it and identify the weak points within their business or the weak points within their processes. And then the accountant can offer advice, having had that conversation facilitated by the book. So thank you for allowing me to share the book. It seems to be going quite well. It's currently charting in WH Smith, which is one of our biggest booksellers here in the UK. It's available at most high street stores, certainly in the UK and the US. And as we all know, it's always available on Amazon.
I'm looking forward to hearing a little bit more about your book, and I'm sure that you and I will have a little bit of a chat about it offline. But thanks for your time. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. And thank you for especially bringing some great stories that I think we can all really benefit from, because we're all in this together. You know, the government says it, but I actually mean it. And it's, you know, how can we as colleagues support each other across the oceans and to share these great stories and to help people to pivot and to thrive and survive.
Absolutely. Rhonda, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.